Chapter 4. A Rewarding Chase. For a brief second, the eyes of the two girls were rooted to the sill of the first-floor window from which Abe Antock hung, while the man who had caused the trouble was running away at top speed. "Nancy, go after that man!" George ordered. "I'll help Abe." Without a moment's hesitation, Nancy started running through the garden of 37 Maple Street. The window cleaner continued to call for help. The house owner heard him and opened the window. She grabbed Abe's hands just as George set up the ladder. Abe rested his feet on one of the rungs. Panting from exertion, he thanked George and the house owner, who wanted to know what had happened. Quickly, George explained, adding, "I hope my friend Nancy Drew catches up with that awful man. Why, Abe, you might have been killed." Nancy, meanwhile, was pursuing the fugitive through gardens, streets, and driveways. She managed to keep him in sight, hoping all the time she would find a policeman to help in the chase. As she reached an intersection, a patrol car came along. Rushing up to it, she waved her arms. When the car stopped, she gasped, "Officer, follow me quickly, please. I'm after a man who tried to kill somebody." The policeman seated beside the driver lost no time in alighting and following Nancy. As they ran, she explained what had happened. Once they almost lost their quarry as he dashed round the corner of a building, but in a few moments they saw him again. He evidently was staying off the streets as much as possible to avoid being captured. Nancy and the officer ran even faster and presently closed in on the fugitive, who was trying to climb a tall fence. The policeman pulled him down. "What'd you want me for?" the man asked. He was young, surly-looking, and had a shock of black hair which hung over his forehead. "I ain't done nothing." As the officer held on to his prisoner, he said to Nancy, "This fellow is one of our town mischief-makers. He's the leader of a gang known as the Green Tigers. Come along, Jake. We'll go back to that place where you yanked the ladder away from the window cleaner." The hoodlum stared unbelievingly. Apparently he had been so sure no one had seen him that he was startled into a confession. "I didn't mean no harm. I was just having some fun." "That's not fun," the officer said. "Come along." With Nancy leading the way, he prodded Jake along until they reached 37 Maple Street. By this time, Abe was on the ground, talking with George and the house owner. As the prisoner was marched up to the group, Abe looked at him malevolently. "So you're the guy who did it. What's the big idea?" "It wasn't my idea," the hoodlum sniveled. "A man came to me and told me I was to watch you and try to make things hard for you." "You didn't have to try to kill me," Abe cried out. "Who was this man?" "I don't know his name. He said he was going to leave town, but somebody else was going to watch me. If I didn't carry out his orders, he'd see that I got in trouble with the police." "What did this man look like?" Nancy asked. "Oh, he was medium height, dark, thin, and not much hair on top of his head." Instantly, Nancy realized that the description fitted Jim O'Keefe. "Where did you meet him?" she asked Jake. He said the man had come over to his table in a restaurant and talked to him. "Did you notice anything unusual about the way he used his hands?" the young sleuth inquired. Jake thought for a moment, then said, "Come to think of it, he did do something funny with his fingers. He'd kind of beat on the table, then he'd lift two of his fingers and make them meet." Nancy turned to the policeman. "I think the name of the man is Jim O'Keefe, and that he's the thief who broke into our house." At this announcement, Jake's eyes opened wide. "You must be Nancy Drew. You're the one that got Abe here in trouble. It was because Abe talked too much to you. He was being shadowed. Well, this guy wanted me to make it hard for Abe." "Yes, I am Nancy Drew. What else can you tell us about this Jim O'Keefe?" Before answering, the hoodlum asked the policeman if things would go easier for him if he told what he knew. The officer said it was not up to him to decide that, but it certainly would be to his advantage to tell the truth. "Well, this guy that you call O'Keefe," Jake said, "bragged about being the front man for a slick gang." The officer had taken out a notebook and pencil and was making notes. He waited for Jake to go on, but the hoodlum declared he had told all he knew about O'Keefe. The officer now addressed the window cleaner. He asked if Abe knew Jake. The workman vigorously denied this and said haughtily, "I want you to know, officer, that I'm an honest man. I do my work and take care of my family. I never have anything to do with hoods." The window cleaner admitted, however, that the previous night he had received a mysterious phone call. "I think the voice was the same one as the man who rented the ladder. He told me I was going to be punished for telling Nancy Drew what I did. I called Miss Drew this morning and asked her to come over so that I could tell her this. I was afraid she might be in some danger." "I certainly appreciate your kindness," said Nancy with a smile. "But Abe, please be careful yourself." The policeman took Jake off in the patrol car. Nancy and George walked to the next corner where they parted. "Watch your step," George warned her chum as she started towards the shopping area. Upon reaching home, Nancy found Hannah Gruen putting a large suitcase on a scales. The housekeeper heaved a great sigh. "Can't take this much. They'll charge extra on the plane." Then she asked, "What did the window cleaner want to tell you?" When Nancy finished the story, the housekeeper gasped, "Oh, Nancy, you may be in terrible danger. Couldn't we just go to Honolulu without getting mixed up with a lot of underhanded people?" Nancy gave Hannah an affectionate squeeze. "Let's not start worrying so early," she suggested. "But I guess what I'd better start worrying about is my own packing." The young detective went into her bedroom, opened her cupboard door, and began selecting the dresses she would take. "This white cotton will be good, and a couple of lightweight sweater suits," Nancy said to herself. She also chose a yellow, a pale blue, and a red and black flowered sunback costume. Then her mind began to wander from the subject at hand. "I believe I'll invite Mr. and Mrs. Sakamaki to dinner this evening," she told herself. "They probably know many Polynesian legends. They might be able to remember one that has to do with water or sleep or death." She hurried to the telephone and called the Hawaiians. Both were delighted to accept the invitation and arrived promptly at 7 o'clock. When Nancy brought up the subject of the legends, Mr. Sakamaki said, "It's possible that the legend about Pele, the sleeping goddess of the volcano, may help you. According to the islanders, Pele now sleeps a good deal and awakens only once in a while to produce a volcano. But in ancient times she was very active. Some 10,000 years ago, while trying to find a permanent home on Oahu Island, she built 2 mountain peaks, Coco Head and Coco Crater, from a great crack she caused in the Ko'olau Range. The legend goes on to say that the goddess was completely satisfied and went to sleep on the island. However, other stories are told that she sleeps in Kilauea Crater on Hawaii Island, but awakens to put on a fiery display at nearby Mauna Loa. When dinner was over and everyone had gathered in the living room, Mr. Sakamaki asked if the Drews would mind turning on their television to hear the weather forecast for the next day. Nancy turned on the television set and tuned it to the proper channel. The news had barely started when the announcer electrified the Drews with a news bulletin which he said had just been received by the station. "Word has come," he began, "of a plane in trouble over the Pacific. It is one which was chartered by a group of students from Emerson College." "Oh, Dad!" Nancy cried out fearfully. "That's the plane that Ned and Dave and Bert are on!" End of chapter 4.